Abuja was too quiet for a capital on edge. The air carried something heavier than fear, anticipation. In the presidential villa, telephones rang without voices answering. Across the city, soldiers moved as if following orders no one had given aloud. Then came the message that split the night in half: stand by for command. No one knew whose command it was. Rumors swept through the barracks like wildfire: generals dismissed, officers detained, convoys redeployed under security reform. By dawn, the government insisted there was no coup. But in a country where silence has buried more truths than speeches ever could, denial sounded a lot like confirmation. And as the sun rose over Abuja, a drone hovered above the deserted parade ground, its hum steady, indifferent, mechanical. To some, it was a sign of surveillance. To others, it was a warning. Either way, the sky itself had joined the conversation. Within hours, the president moved. In a broadcast that felt more like a verdict than an address. Bola Tinubu dismissed the nation's top generals, the chief of defense, the army, the navy, and the air force, all replaced overnight. The official line called it a strategic reform to strengthen national security. But local reports told another story: a dozen senior officers quietly detained, their names erased from the day's agenda. The Ministry of Defense denied any coup, insisting discipline had merely been restored. Yet in a city where rumors move faster than convoys, silence became ammunition. By evening, the question was no longer if a coup was coming, but who it would serve if it ever did. While Abuja argued in whispers, the war outside spoke in fire. Far from the capital's marble corridors, the dust of the northeast refused to settle. Every week, reports arrived: new raids, new victories, new dead. The same land that had buried empires was now burying sons. In the camps of Borno and Yobe, soldiers called it the endless rotation. They fought the same enemies under different commanders, chasing shadows that seemed to multiply. For them, the rumors of a coup were just background noise, another kind of war they could not afford to fight. But as the capital shifted command, something on the front line began to change. Orders slowed. Supplies stalled. Reinforcements that were promised never came. A platoon that once trusted every signal now hesitated at the crackle of the radio. Because out here, a single wrong frequency could mean death, or betrayal. One night near the town of Dikwa, a forward unit intercepted a group of insurgents moving under the cover of fog. The ambush should have been routine. Instead, the sky turned against them. A low hum descended from above, a swarm of drones, small, fast, and armed. The soldiers hit the ground, firing blindly into the darkness. They had heard of such attacks, but never seen them this precise. When it was over, the sand was on fire, and one survivor swore he saw the drones draw patterns, almost like letters, before they vanished. At dawn, command confirmed, over 50 militants neutralized in coordinated operations. The official report spoke of success, of momentum regained, of enemies decimated. What it didn't mention was the silence that followed, the kind that comes when victory feels borrowed. For the people of the Northeast, every military bulletin sounded the same: numbers, praise, resolve. But the rescued civilians told another story. They spoke of camps where captors wore stolen uniforms, of drones that filmed rather than fought, of night skies where the hum came not from enemies, but from eyes. Back in Abuja, analysts on television framed the operations as proof of stability. The armed forces remain loyal, one expert declared. These successes show unity of purpose. But loyalty, like peace, is a word that loses shape when spoken too often. In the barracks, men traded rumors like cigarettes, about missing colleagues, about files classified overnight, about generals replaced mid-operation. It was as if two wars were unfolding, one against insurgents, another against uncertainty itself. In one, rifles answered questions. In the other, questions replaced rifles. A captain in the field wrote in his notebook. They tell us to hold the line. But no one tells us which line still belongs to the country. That single sentence spread quietly through the ranks. It captured the exhaustion of men who had watched governments rise and fall while the same fires burned around them. Then, a message arrived from Defense Headquarters, Operation Red Mirror. A new phase, a new doctrine, a promise of decisive action. The same phrase appeared in press releases and on banners in the capital. For a brief moment, optimism returned. But Red Mirror meant something else to those who named it. It wasn't just a campaign, it was reflection. A reminder that every drone they shot down showed them a reflection of themselves, a nation constantly at war with its own image. Out in the desert, the Ghost Unit, a handful of engineers and soldiers known for improvisation, began tracking the drone's signals. What they found unsettled everyone. The frequencies were not random. They followed military-grade encryption patterns. Some signals, when traced, bounced back from beyond Nigeria's borders, across the Lake Chad basin, sometimes even further. If you believe courage isn't just measured by victory but by truth, let your voice be part of this story. Share your thoughts below, because silence protects no one. When a nation hides its scars, it only bleeds in the dark. That discovery never made the headlines. Instead, the official briefings focused on success: 50 terrorists neutralized, hostages rescued, morale high. But inside the command tents, the mood was heavy. They had realized something terrifying: someone was watching both sides of the battlefield at once. When the Ghost Unit reported their findings to headquarters, the reply was terse: cease transmission. Await orders. Hours later, 2 of their technicians were reassigned to Abuja. The rest went silent. Weeks later, when the president replaced another round of senior officers, no one called it coincidence. And when local radio announced new anti-terror victories, no one cheered. Because by then, everyone understood, every success came with a price. And every silence concealed a struggle. From the capital to the front line, Nigeria was fighting a double war, one visible, one invisible. The visible war spilled blood, the invisible one bled trust. Both demanded sacrifices. Both had casualties. By the time night fell again over Borno, the soldiers watched the horizon burn and asked themselves the same question whispered in Abuja. If a nation wins its battles but loses its truth, has it really survived? The generals called it progress. The soldiers called it a prison. The super camp strategy was meant to be Nigeria's answer to chaos, a fortified model where troops would withdraw from scattered outposts and regroup into massive, heavily armed garrisons. Fewer bases, they said, meant stronger defense, better coordination, fewer casualties. On paper, it looked like order. In the field, it looked like surrender. From the air, the super camps gleamed like islands of concrete in a sea of dust. Inside, life was safe, too safe. Patrols shrank, intelligence dried up, and the villages once protected became ghosts. The enemy filled the vacuum. Boko Haram and ISWAP didn't need to win, they only had to wait. For every fortified camp that rose, 10 villages disappeared from the map. At briefings, officials spoke of efficiency. In the barracks, men whispered about abandonment. Some called the camps castles of cowardice. Others saw them as symbols of a government protecting walls instead of people. Morale fell faster than bullets. Commanders who questioned the doctrine were reassigned. A few resigned outright. One brigadier left a note behind: "We have built a kingdom of fear and called it security." Then came Borno. In the searing heat of a June afternoon, a senior officer and 14 soldiers were killed when insurgents breached the perimeter of one of the largest super camps. It should have been impossible. The base had walls high enough to stop a truck. Yet the enemy walked through the gates like they had the keys. That night, Abuja received a coded message: fortress compromised. The next morning, the president announced another round of personnel reorganization. On the surface, it was a response to loss. Beneath it, it felt like revenge. Every reshuffle in the capital sent ripples to the front. Every rumor of a coup magnified those ripples into waves. Within weeks, suspicion became standard procedure. Soldiers no longer knew whether to salute or to look away. Orders were obeyed mechanically. Not faithfully. Inside the super camps, men sat under tin roofs, scrolling through news feeds about the very wars they were fighting. They saw headlines celebrating major victories, while their own rations spoiled in the sun. Some laughed, some wept, but most just stared at the sky. It was filled with drones again. Some theirs. Some not. No one could tell anymore. The illusion was complete. The government thought it had secured its soldiers by pulling them inside walls, but what it had really done was isolate its army from its people. The war was no longer a front line, it was a front door that no one wanted to open. Rumors of a coup continued to circle, and each new military announcement sounded less like assurance and more like defense. Analysts spoke of stability, but in the north, villagers used another word, abandonment. When the ghost unit's findings about foreign signals reached certain ears in the capital, a decision was made: tighten information, cut communication, centralize control. That order, meant to prevent panic, became a noose around trust. In the weeks that followed, a captain from the ghost unit was found dead in his quarters. Officially, suicide. Unofficially, everyone understood it as a message. After his funeral, an anonymous statement appeared online: "We fight two wars, one for the nation, and one against its fear." It was deleted within an hour. But by then, the phrase had spread. Printed on walls, painted on barracks doors, whispered in canteens. Fear had a slogan now, and it was wearing a uniform. Back in Abuja, politicians prepared speeches for Independence Day. They spoke of unity, reform, and resilience. But every time a camera panned to the faces of the soldiers standing guard, you could see the distance, not in kilometers, but in faith. A nation cannot fortify its way out of mistrust. Walls keep bodies safe, not souls. And in Nigeria's war for stability, souls are what have been bleeding most. They called it Operation Red Mirror, a name whispered through encrypted channels, spoken like a prayer and a warning. The objective was simple: hunt the swarm, reclaim the sky. In the sands of the northeast, the ghost unit prepared for the mission. They had been exiled from headlines but not from duty. In makeshift tents of wire and dust, they assembled jammers from broken radios, rewired batteries into shields, and painted their helmets red, the color of defiance and reflection. Their leader, a major known only as TK, had one rule: if it flies without a flag, bring it down. That night, the desert turned into a theater of lights. Drones appeared in dozens, black dots against a crimson moon. The first fell easily, then another, then 20. But the swarm adapted. They began moving as one body, as if a single mind guided them. Signals spiked. The ghost unit's improvised radar screens filled with static. In Abuja, the Security Council watched the live feed. Ministers cheered every flash of an explosion, unaware that the men on the ground were losing connection, losing oxygen, losing faith. TK's voice cut through the static: "We have 50 targets, they're circling us now." The hum grew deafening. Drones fell like hail, but the price was high. Batteries fried, communications died. And then, silence, broken only by the crackling sound of burning sand. When the smoke cleared, the sky was empty. 50 drones down. Command celebrated. Press briefings called it a decisive blow against terror. But when TK returned to base, his face told another story. "They were not enemy models," he said quietly. "They were ours, reprogrammed." The room fell silent. Someone asked how that was possible. TK pointed to the data logs recovered from the wreckage: serial codes registered to a contractor once hired by the Defense Ministry itself. It was the kind of truth that could end careers, or lives. By dawn, the ghost unit was ordered back to Abuja, for debriefing. Their communications were cut, their access badges revoked. On television, officials repeated the victory narrative, showing footage of drone wreckage but never mentioning the recovered chips. In barracks across the nation, soldiers watched the broadcast in silence. Some saluted the screen out of habit. Others turned it off. Because they knew what every soldier eventually learns: not every battle is fought for the nation. Some are fought to keep certain truths buried beneath the sand. Days later, a classified memo circulated among senior officers. It described disciplinary investigations into the Ghost Unit for breach of protocol. Whispers spread: were they traitors, or witnesses? The irony was brutal. The same soldiers who had risked their lives to reclaim the sky were now grounded by suspicion. In Maiduguri, local radio played a clip of the president thanking our heroes for their unflinching loyalty. The words rang hollow. Loyalty, by then, had become a fragile currency, spent too freely by those who never fought. That night, someone painted 3 words on a military wall. 50 drones down. It was not vandalism. It was testimony. If you believe that a nation's heroes are not the ones who obey orders, but the ones who protect its truth, tell this story. Share it. Let history remember their silence as courage, not crime. The Ghost Unit never appeared in the media again. Unofficially, some were transferred to remote posts. Others simply vanished. But pieces of their work survived: fragments of software, frequency logs, and one final report encrypted under the name Red Mirror/Phase 2. The document was never published. Yet it held one question that has haunted Nigeria ever since. If our enemies can fly our machines, who is really in control? In the capital, the question echoed louder than any gunfire. Politicians accused each other of leaks, of loyalty to invisible patrons, of playing foreign games with domestic blood. Outside, soldiers carried coffins draped in flags that had begun to lose their meaning. The coup that the nation feared had not yet come, but its outline was visible in every corridor, in every glance of doubt between a leader and the led. And somewhere in that widening space of suspicion, the future trembled. Because what collapses a republic is not always the bullet or the bomb, sometimes, it is the moment when truth becomes classified. The truth arrived not with confession, but with a signal. In a dimly lit lab beneath Defense Headquarters, 2 engineers decrypted the final data logs from Operation Red Mirror. What they found turned victory into revelation. The coordinates of the fallen drones matched shipment routes registered months earlier under a contract labeled Infrastructure Surveillance Program. The signature belonged to a private security firm headquartered thousands of miles away, a firm that had once trained Nigeria's own anti-terror units. The drones that haunted the country's skies were never stolen. They were borrowed, rented through paperwork, redirected through proxies, and reprogrammed to fly against their owners. It was the perfect loop: technology gifted as aid, returned as control. In files marked confidential, the engineers traced signal relays bouncing from Niger, Cameroon, and beyond, not insurgent networks, but satellites tied to commercial defense grids in Europe and North America. Every encrypted pulse carried a timestamp, the same hour the government reshuffled its generals. Coincidence? Or coordination? The report made it to the president's desk at dawn. He read it once, then twice. His advisors urged silence. This could collapse partnerships, one warned. Our allies will deny everything. But the document refused to disappear. Within a week, foreign press outlets began to hint at cyber miscommunications, at equipment misuse, at rogue operators. No one said the word interference, yet everyone understood it. For years, Nigeria's war had been fought in deserts and swamps. Now, it had entered the cloud, a battlefield with no flags, no uniforms, only contracts and code. The coup, perhaps. was never about seizing the palace. It was about seizing perception, turning soldiers against generals, generals against the president, citizens against each other. An invisible coup. A war fought not with bullets, but with bandwidth. And in that war, the first casualty was trust. When the ghost unit's decrypted files leaked to journalists, the servers went dark within hours. By the time investigators arrived, hard drives had been wiped, access cards revoked, logs overwritten. Officially, nothing existed. Unofficially, the silence screamed. Across Africa, leaders watched closely. They saw how easily technology, sold as support, could become surveillance. They saw how a single foreign signal could tilt a nation toward chaos. The revelation spread beyond Nigeria's borders, into conference halls and war rooms. Some called it espionage, others called it insurance, a way to keep Africa's largest army accountable. But accountability without sovereignty is just another word for obedience. And as the sun rose over Abuja, a new kind of awareness dawned. That the real coup had never needed tanks or troops, only trust, technology, and time. Dawn broke over Abuja, quiet but unbroken. The rumors had faded, the drones had fallen, yet the question remained, who owns the sky? Not the generals. Not the contractors. Not even the president. The sky belongs to those who dare to defend it, not with weapons, but with truth. Across Africa, a new awareness stirs, that sovereignty is not just a border drawn on a map, but a signal that must be reclaimed from the hands that hijacked it. Because empires no longer march with flags, they drift through satellites, software, and silence. And still, the people rise. Farmers, soldiers, engineers, dreamers, each holding a fragment of that sky, each refusing to surrender it again. If the coup was invisible, then so is the revolution, a revolution of awareness. Of unity, of voices no longer afraid to speak. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe. Join this movement. Because the fight for Africa's freedom is not fought in secret rooms, it lives in every voice that refuses to be silenced. The sky belongs to us. Always.